In today's video, I'm talking all about the gear that I use, the settings I use, and more when I create my headshots and my portraits. So let's get right into it. What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me. As always, my name is Pete. I'm a portrait photographer based in New York, and today I want to talk all about my portrait workflow. So I'm going to talk about how I do what I do and what I choose to use for different kinds of situations, because the gear I use and the settings I use and stuff like that will vary depending on the kind of gig I have. Primarily, this will happen based on if I'm doing an in-office headshot gig for, say, a company, like a corporate gig, or if I'm doing a portrait session in my studio for, say, an actor, an artist, or a musician, or something like that. So we're going to talk all about that. I hope you like this video. Hit that like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. Leave me a comment below if you have questions, and I will make sure I get to as many of those as I can. Let's talk gear first. Now, the primary camera that I'm using and I've been using for all of my portrait work and my headshot work, or most of it I should say, is the Canon EOS R5. I bought the R5 probably soon after it was released. It was at least 3 or so years ago I bought it. So I've had it for a while. The camera has been excellent to me. I've had zero issues with it. It's worked perfectly, almost flawlessly. The only issue I've had with this is tethering, which seems to be fine now, but with tethering to Capture One for a while there gave me some crazy issues, but now I think we're in good shape. So why do I like this camera? Number one, it's a workhorse. It just does the job. I don't have to worry about it. It's made very well. It's comfortable. It's easy to use in a lot of ways. The autofocus system is amazing. It doesn't miss. So if you have it on eye tracking autofocus, it locks onto the eye, and then you can use the joystick on the back of the camera to very easily go from one to the other eye. It's super intuitive, and it's very accurate. Another reason I love this camera, it will do video and stills equally as well. So you can basically use it for everything. The full frame sensor on this camera, combined with the newer, higher end RF Canon lenses, I understand, believe me, I know they're expensive. However, the images that this combination creates are stunning. Not only are they stunning, but you have a ton of latitude and detail for editing. So I like all of that. What else do I use besides Canon? Those of you who watch my channel are probably saying to yourself, Pete, what about your Fuji cameras? I also use Fuji cameras. Primarily I'm using the Fuji X-T5, and this will be my backup camera when I go on to location shoots, and I'll use this. And I have a 50-140 that's a great lens with this camera for headshots. I bring it as a backup on corporate shoots for a number of reasons. The main reason is that this really isn't a workhorse camera like the R5. So if I have to take, say, 100 headshots in a day, the R5 is just the better choice for me. So I bring this as a backup. It can get the job done for sure if I have to do that. I've used this with the 50-140 for 50, 60 headshots in a day, and I've had no issues with it, but the Canon just is better for that kind of work, in my opinion. The focus is better, and the overall use, it just kind of makes more sense for that kind of a gig for me. I use this in my studio as well. We'll talk more about that later. I'm going to put that aside. Let's go back to the Canon. So there's two basic kinds of shoots that I do when it comes to headshots. In my studio, or on location. Now, on location can mean a number of things. However, most of the time when I'm on location, my clients want head and shoulders headshots with a medium gray background or something similar. I will be contracted to go to a company and do anywhere from, say, 10 to 100 of these in a day. Sometimes I'll have multi-day gigs where I'm maybe taking 300 pictures. And by and large, those people want head and shoulders headshots, simple gray background. So what do I use for that? Well, actually, I'm using the R5 with this lens, which is the Canon 70-200. This is the old version. This is an EF lens, so I use it with the adapter on the R5. And the thing about this is the actual OG original one. It doesn't even have image stabilizer. So this is the version 1 of this lens. I've had it probably about 10 years. I bought it I think used when I bought it. It's probably like a 20-year-old lens, maybe more than that, but it's so good I don't feel the need to upgrade. It's heavy and it's made of metal. It's a lot more robust in the kind of the way it's built than the newer lenses, and eventually I'll upgrade to the newer version, but I just don't see the need for it. It also, with the R5 and the adapter, works great. It focuses fast, the images are beautiful, the quality is excellent, so I don't feel the need to upgrade it at this time. Now, the reason I like this for headshots is because I'll usually shoot around 100 millimeters for Head & Shoulders headshots, and I like that the compression it gives. I think it works well. The other reason I like that is because then I could be slightly further away from the client, so we have enough space between us. I don't feel like I'm cramming into their personal space. However, if I get a client, which I often do, who says, well, each team member or the executives of the team will have a portrait that's seating in a chair or something like that, and a headshot, well, then I'm gonna default to this lens, which I picked up recently. And this is the Canon 24-70 2.8 lens, the L lens. And I find that this is the perfect lens, the perfect focal length, really, for those kinds of shoots. So if I have a client and they want headshots, I can do this and I just zoom out to 70, and I'm on, even if I'm on my tripod or whatever, and I still can be far enough away from the client that I'm taking their headshot, but then I don't want to have to be changing lenses, especially when I'm tethered to my laptop and all that. Another reason I like this lens is when I have a client who wants an environmental portrait. Like I did a shoot recently where the client didn't want gray background. They have a beautiful lobby and they wanted some environmental portraits in the lobby. And so this, because I have the wider angle, this space I was in was it was kind of cramped, the shooting space. So I don't want 70-200. I want to be able to be at like maybe 50 millimeters or something like that. And I'm going to zoom in and zoom out to get it to the perfect framing I want. And honestly, I'll actually shoot a little wider than I intend the final image to be, just in case, because I want to be able to crop it vertically, horizontally, and have a little bit of space. So if I'm doing an environmental headshot, or whatever you want to call it, headshot portrait, some people call it, then I want to have a little bit more space. Again, this lens works perfect for that. When I go back to the studio, I am using this same gear. I find myself using the 70-200 less and less and less for that, and for a number of reasons. Number one, the 70 that I can get on the 24-70, it's still 2.8, it's a newer lens, and I can zoom in and zoom out, so it's redundant. And then I find for my acting clients, I don't like the compression at like 100 millimeters. I feel like it starts to get a little too flat. I want the portraits to be more intimate and the headshots for those actors to be more intimate and sometimes even slightly uneasy if it's kind of a creative portrait. And so I find that using a wider angle for a headshot and getting closer, because you're going to get a little bit of distortion, but the person's going to feel more in your face in the image, works better for acting headshots and even for artists and things like that, where you're thinking outside the box. I'll still give them headshots and like standard kind of commercial look. I'll give them those and I'll shoot usually at 70, but then I'm going to just change and I'll also do a variety. So I'm doing headshots, I'm doing half length, full length. I'm doing everything in one session. This lens just makes the most sense. Now, the other lens, and this is probably my favorite lens, and I did a video recently on this lens for PPA, which I'll link below. Before I got the 24-70, this was the only lens I used I would use it for complete portrait shoots in my studio, again, for actors and stuff. This is the 50 millimeter f1.2. This is still the lens I love to use the most for that kind of work, for a number of reasons. Number one, the 51.2 Canon lens on the R5, again, it's just, the quality is insane. If you get a 50 millimeter kind of close to your subject, it's going to distort a little bit, but sometimes that distortion looks really good depending on the shape of the person's face. You just have to be aware of that, and you have to make sure it's working right with that particular face. But the other reason I love this, because I like to shoot at 1.2. So nothing is more compelling to me than a portrait up close shot wide open where only the eye is in focus, and then even the nose, like the bridge of the tip of the nose will be out of focus, the ears, everything will be slightly out. I know some people don't like this look, that's fine, but I love it, and I do it all day long, and my clients love it. So what I'll do is I'll shoot wide open, and I shoot at 1.2, and the only thing I make sure of is whichever eye is closest to the film plane or the sensor plane is in focus. So if the person is this way, this eye should be in focus. If they're this way, this eye, you know, you get it. And then if they're squared up to the camera, then I just default to focusing on their right eye, their camera right eye, which is actually their left eye. So I usually default to focus on their camera right eye. But just make sure the eye that's closest to you is in focus as best as you can. I'm gonna divert from the cameras for a second to talk about lights, because this is the other thing that's important when we're talking about shooting wide open. I shoot with continuous lights primarily in my studio, and on location, 50-50, and I'll talk about that in a second. The lights I use more than anything are Nan lights, and I have a couple of older Nan lights, FS300, and I also have an FC500B, which is a bicolor Nan light. So I'll use these as my key light, as my fill light. They do an amazing job. I use them with different modifiers. Sometimes I shoot with this reflector on here. Sometimes I shoot with a smaller umbrella, a larger umbrella. Sometimes I'll shoot with an Angler beauty dish. In fact, let me show you that, because that's probably the modifier I use the most right now in my studio for my creative portraits. It's an Angler beauty dish, 22 inches, and I'll use it all day long like this without any diffusion. I have diffusion, it depends on the person's skin tones, how fair they are. But I'll put this on my Nan light, and I'll shoot the Nan light at a very low percentage, and then I eliminate all of the ambient light, or as much as I can, in my studio. So the only light that's hitting the subject is coming from my modifiers. I love this for my portraits, and again, if you combine this with shooting wide open, you're able to do that with continuous light, of course, because you don't need a synchronization speed like you do for flash. You can shoot at any shutter speed. So I might be shooting at 1/1000th, f1.2, and ISO 400 or something like that, and I get really beautiful results, and I like the creamy kind of look that you get from shooting wide open too. So this is what I don't ever bring this with me to a corporate location shoot. I just don't do it. I don't need it for that. But in my studio, creative portraits, actors, artists, and even if I have a corporate person, a corporate client who comes to the studio, I'm gonna break this out and do some more of the creative lighting with them as well, because they love it and I think it works great for them as well. So there is overlap with all of this. However, if I go on location, I'm bringing sometimes my Nan lights, but more often than not, I will bring Godox flashes. This is a V100 that I just picked up recently, and I really like it. And I have AD200s, which I just mount onto this Angler, also 36-inch deep octa. And I will use this to do clamshell light for my corporate clients. So I use that, and I use a reflector underneath, and I just get it really close and directional, because I want it to be even. I don't want a lot of shadows. And that does a great job. It's easy to set up. There's no wires because it's just a flash with a battery. So I don't need plugs and stuff like I do for my Nan lights. So if I'm doing those headshots in, you know, that framing, gray background, like the standard headshot, that's what I'm gonna use. If I'm doing the more creative portraits on location, or if I'm doing the environmental portraits, I should say, then I'll often use the Nan lights for that, and then just balance the light with the ambient and figure it out as I go there. Now, in my studio, let's get back to the studio, I'm also using some other gear. This right here is probably my favorite light to use as a background light. This is a Generay, which is a B&H brand. It's a Generay Fresnel light, and it's bicolor, and it has full RGB control. So you can create any color with it. The way that I like to use it, and if you've seen my portraits, you've seen stuff like this, is, I'm not gonna get the effect here because it's too close, but you can kind of see a little bit of it, is I'll actually use this light just to put a splash of light on my background, and like the way it's set right now, this is not a color being projected on the background. It's just a different color temperature. So it's at, I'll tell you what it's at. It's at 2800 Kelvin. And then I can change this if I want a cooler light on the background or a warmer light. And this is what I do all the time. So I'll use this as a background light, give it a little splash of color. And I like the barn doors because I can adjust like where it goes, how much of it is hitting the background and all that stuff. So I use this as my background light, and I'll use that beauty dish as key, and then just a large umbrella as fill. That's one of my go-to moves in the studio that I call hero light. In the studio, I will also break out the X-T5. Now, sometimes I'll just use this for an entire shoot, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes I'm just in the mood to shoot the Fuji, and it can do everything the Canon does, kind of like a truncated version of it. So the autofocus, of course, isn't quite as good, but it doesn't matter if you're doing a portrait shoot in controlled light with one person, it's gonna do the job fine. The smaller sensor doesn't give me quite as much dynamic range. However, I've used it for full portrait sessions before, and I've really liked the results. But the thing that I like to do with this sometimes is shoot a film simulation and see it apply right on the screen so people can see different looks as I go. I think it's fun to do that. All right, now that we've covered gear, let's talk a little bit about settings, because the settings is where I feel that many, especially headshot photographers who are doing corporate headshots, need a lot of help. The settings I use, I'm gonna use a shutter speed around 1/200th of a second. I don't want it to be too slow, because if I'm using continuous lights, even at 1/200th of a second, if someone is moving, you might get them out of focus. So you do need to be at least 1/200th, and I find that's just a good place to start. I'm starting 1/200th, f4, and then ISO 200, somewhere around there. And that will give you a good baseline of where to start. And then you just got to tweak it depending on the person in front of you. I mean, the lights you're using, the skin tones they have, the color of their clothing. Like for instance, a darker colored shirt will absorb more light, so you have to account for that. There's a lot of factors. The most important thing you need to do though here is set your white balance properly. And so that's what I want to really focus on for a second. Because if you shoot a daylight balanced flash or a daylight balanced continuous light, if you shoot it and you set your camera to 5600 Kelvin, everything just looks way too warm. So I don't use it that warm at all. I will actually set my camera, when I use my Nan lights, my white balance, my starting point is 4800 on the camera. This is daylight balance to 5600, but I find that 4800 gives me a much more accurate skin tone, color, and it doesn't have that weird sort of warm haze to everything that you get when you shoot with the white balance to, at the same number. Same thing with my Godox flashes. These are daylight balanced. However, anytime I try to shoot with my camera at 5600 in a studio setting, it looks way warm and gross. However, 4800 sort of is a little too cool. So I will start at 5000 here on the flash, and then sometimes go up to around 5200 depending on the situation. So the main thing is you got to figure out the white balance that makes sense with your flashes, with your camera system, with your studio. There's a lot of things that will affect the white balance. Obviously ambient light in the room, but I can tell you that a good place to start is lower than the white balance daylight number on your flash or on your camera. The most common thing, like I said, that I see people do that's a misstep if you're doing headshots and you want to work with high-end clients. Like I'm lucky I work with a lot of high-end clients in New York, and they don't want it to look like an old-fashioned Sears portrait where everything is kind of brown and gross. So I find that shooting a little cooler, even if it's a little bit on the cool side, it gives it a more upscale corporate look. People love it. And the skin tones are still gonna look accurate. So there's no perfect white balance when you're shooting, but there is kind of a spectrum here, I would say. Like there's a little window of white balance. Some people like it a little warmer. Some people like it a little cooler. I like it a little cooler, but the skin tones still look good. So that's kind of what you have to find and figure out. How do you do that? Well, you just got to experiment. You got to do it a lot. You got to practice. You got to know your own gear, like I said, and figure out where the settings are for your gear. But really the main thing is you have to be able to see good color. So you're not going to be able to see good color unless you look at a lot of photographs. You learn from someone who shows you, like I didn't know my color was bad until another photographer who's more experienced than me said, Pete, this is warm. It's all like way warm. Look at the skin tones, they're off. Here's why. Look at your background. So you kind of have to have someone teaching you is really the way. Okay, what are we missing? All right, let's talk a little bit about the software that I use. First of all, I'm shooting into Capture One. You can cull images and make favorites and galleries and like that so easily in Capture One. The other software I use the most is Affinity Photo, which is my editing software. So it's kind of like a small version of Photoshop. And then I'll also use eVoto for some of my retouching. So eVoto is like a retouching software that works great as well. Okay, now the game-changing software that I use for my corporate shoots and location shoots is Headshot Tools. You can make multiple galleries for each person, instantly deliver them, have them pick their retouches. It just takes all the work out of proof galleries. So in the past, I would have to like manually make galleries, send them to the client, then wait for them to favorite a picture, have it come back to me. Headshot Tools eliminates all of that. The other thing you can do, which is really the best part about it, is it has an integrated scheduling system. So if you use Headshot Tools, what I do now is I just set it up for my client, and you can set up, okay, here's the day where we're shooting on June 25th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can block out slots, like you want a client to come every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. You pick the time, you pick how many you want. You can build in a break if you want to build in a lunch break. And then you just give this one link to your contact at the company. So I'll send to the marketing director, hey, here's the link for everyone to sign up for their headshots. Just have them click here and they can pick their time. They pick their time. It all happens without me having to do anything. It's so awesome. It's brilliant. So Headshot Tools is my main go-to software for my corporate clients and any kind of client where I want to just deliver proof galleries, or even if I don't want to deliver proof galleries, sometimes I just want them to pick their favorite at the shoot and then just send it to them. And so you can do that easily as well. It just sends them the retouched file. There's a lot more that it can do too, but that's kind of an overview. So those are my softwares that I use the most as well. I mean, I think that this is enough for this video. If you have questions, which I'm sure you will, just post them in the comments below, and I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. But this, I hope I've given you a good kind of insight into the basic gear I use. This is more or less an overview of what my crazed kind of frantic life as a photographer is like. So if you like it, you like the video, just thumbs it up, follow me. And that's all I got for you today. Here's wishing you an awesome day. Go take some great pictures. That's the thing that matters more than anything. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.